let's talk about the Global Plastic Treaty taking place in Canada this week. Global leaders will be coming together to address the issues related to plastic pollution. And for the first time ever, they'll be coming up with a draft of what should guide global framework as regards plastic pollution in the world. What is the significance of this plastic treaty in Canada? To shed more light on this, we're being joined by Sam Orovwuje, who is our in-house analyst. Glad you have been joining us this morning.
Good morning, Femi. My pleasure to be here.
Good morning.
And good morning, Blessing.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
Good to be here, as always.
For creating time when it comes to international issues. And here it is. We're looking at the World Plastic Treaty talks in Canada. Give us a background. Why is it significant to have this kind of talk? You're aware of what happened in 2022, where United Nations, projected that before the end of 2024, we should have the first ever treaty as regards addressing plastic pollution in the world. Why is it significant to have this kind of talks and then the first ever treaty?
Thank you very much, Femi. I think let's take a little overview. This is the 2015 Climate Summit in Paris. Some of the highlights of that summit was to put up a treaty framework that will guide the production of plastic and the way plastics are disposed in the world. Since on Monday in Ottawa calendar, there's a meeting between negotiators, industry leaders, civil society groups to see how they can find a common ground so that they can put up a treaty obligation. By the way, treaty obligations are binding obligations that state parties must adhere to. So the process of trying to harmonize various positions between the industry, government officials, negotiators, is ongoing. But the challenge, particularly what is going on in Canada as we speak, is that there's a divergent view on some of the major elements that should form that treaty obligation. The Asia Pacific has the current position. The African continental body has a different position. Then the West in general, particularly the US, is not really comfortable with some of those provisions that are to be negotiated and see how they can reach a common consensus. But then what is key is that there's a divergent opinion on what should form the treaty. So hopefully, maybe at the end of this negotiation process, to dot and cross all the T's, we'll see how we can go forward. But my worry personally is that once the U.S. Is not really interested in the treaty agreement, so to speak, or obligation, there's always a problem in trying to see how we can pull that through. But maybe as we progress this conversation, we'll be able to speak. The African position, in my view, maybe because as an African, I can relate with the issues of plastic. And I think what Africans are putting forward in that negotiation table to finalize all the major clauses on that treaty is formidable, and I'm hope that they are able to pull their aspirations and goals through.
All right, so the Plastic Talks Treaty ongoing in Canada, which is bringing lots of tensions regarding how much plastic should be produced, how it should be discarded, and what it should be used for. Now, the plastic markets globally is estimated to be worth about $627 billion as of 2023. Could the issue of how much plastic should be produced, in your perception, be a great concern as this talks is ongoing?
Yes, it's a great concern, particularly from the industry that have formed a formidable lobbying pressure on the people that are trying to put up the treaty together. So on that hand, because if you look at industry that produce plastic and the benefit to those, the commercial interest to some of those manufacturing companies is very great. So, and they've made some massive investment in terms of how plastics are produced from their production line. So they are not really disposed towards a treaty that will limit the production of plastic. That's on the one hand. Two, the way Africa in particular suffer much from the importation of those plastic products leave much to be desired. So in that regard, I think the lobbying in terms of pressure, in terms of support by the producer is overwhelmingly impactful. Therefore, particularly America, who is a larger producer of plastic products in the world, is aligning with industry to see how they can stifle the process in terms of some of the provision. So it's a major issue.
You're aware that even in the course of the week, some group of persons, staged a protest as regards the treaty. Now, let's look at what are some of these concerns being raised, and then what are the oppositions or threats you see to this treaty becoming a reality? It's the first ever, and if that succeeds, it's going to help globally on addressing this issue of plastic waste. But what are some of the challenges, some of the threats you foresee, and how can they be tackled? And what are the interests as well? Because there are parties there who are talking about the ban of some chemicals, which is also of interest to them. So what are these interests, these differences, and how can they be resolved?
I think there are two levels, in my view. Those who have commercial interest for the production of fossil fuel byproducts are not willing to give up, even though we have a massive global campaign for alternative or renewable energy. That's on the one hand. On the other side, civil society group, climate change campaigners are of the view that if over 5% of the pollution and the emission is coming from plastic production, therefore the treaty will be able to address that negative impact on the ecosystem. So, but if you look at the process of lobbying, activists on the other side trying to provide an enabling framework that will support the reduction in terms of plastic production. But those who were benefiting in terms of the benefit in terms of dollar, let's just use the international currency as a denominator, are not willing to give up, even where we had even up to the recent one that took place in United Arab Emirates. The core issues of even financing, the core issues of transferring technology and all that has become a major challenge. And that's why Rwanda in particular, on the side of the African campaigner for this treaty to come through as quickly as possible is a welcoming initiative. But America, as it is not really in support of some element of the treaty, and they are putting some other chemical element to be included that does not fall within their own space. So that will stifle the negotiation process. But you have over 130 countries that are formidably supporting this treaty, and I'm sure even while the process of treaty negotiations are very difficult because of the geopolitical dimension and the role of the Big Seven in trying to shape the policy across the world, leave much to be desired.
Now, which should be the first point to start from? Should it be about how much of plastic to produce, or what plastic should be used for? If the use is not defined, then how then can we define the quantity?
No, I think even if we prioritize it in terms of that, there's a need to limit the production. So once you're able to put a framework that limit the production. Then the other issues in terms of how plastic should be used, how plastic should be discarded, you have almost solved 50% of the problem. If you put a framework that between now and 2030, which is the milestone set by the world to see how we can reduce the impact of climate change generally, the entire ecosystem, plastic is just one of the elements. So if we can reduce that, and once a treaty is put in place, become conventional on the state parties to respect that treaty, and the treaty is always a binding obligation in the international system.
Let's look at this this way, using the principles of economics, the law of supply and demand. So if there is reduction in the production of plastics, yet what plastics should be used for is not stated, doesn't that make the demand for the limited supply more, meaning more money for those who are in the plastic market, but it doesn't really address the issues?
Yes, you know, there are three elements. Principally, the treaty tend to address. Number one, reduction in the production of plastic. Number two, the usage of plastic. Number three, the waste management aspect of it. So these three elements are not in isolation. So you put the agreement, the treaty will state the various elements that take cognizance of those three elements. So none will be in isolation. So if we just take one component, then we may not be able to address the real issue. So the point is that those three elements are tied together in a way, and that's why you can see the discordant tune between those who believe that the treaty should come through as quickly as possible. Negotiators are very mindful of the fact that if those three elements are not in the final draft treaty, then the milestones that treaty tend to achieve may not be there in the first place.
Now, talking about the use of plastic, I would like to make reference to what the Canadian Environment Minister said in this regard, and then I would love to quote him, and I would love you to react to it. It reads, adding that the part should establish targets and eliminate unnecessary single-use plastics and chemicals. The emphasis on the single-use plastics and chemicals. How do you react to it? Because you were also talking about not just the elimination of the waste, but the use of the plastics. They are so important. They are taking this position that it targets eliminating unnecessary single-use plastics and chemical. How do you react to that?
I think I would take the first option. I won't want to talk about the chemicals because I don't know the volume and the types of chemicals involved, so I don't want to go into that. That's a bit technical. But on the other comment that he has made, I think is a very sound, logical comment to make. What he's saying is that if you must use plastic, the plastic that is put into the system must find a way to be used beyond one particular option. That again, we have to reduce the quantity of production where you have a multiple use of certain items, but we don't have the details of what it really means by that. But I think logically, it's saying that if you're able to produce certain elements of those plastics that has multiple use, therefore the number or the volume of what you are going to produce in the first instance will reduce considerably. But that's just is a personal position. But what is critical in this final draft and final negotiation and consideration is that there must be a mix of what should be produced, how the plastic must be used, and how the plastic must be discarded as waste. And that third element is particularly germane for Africa, that is worst hit in terms of plastic waste management. So, and that's the clamor, and that's what negotiators at the table from Africa are saying, that their concern is more about how we discard this waste and how you can finance some of the difficult options that plastic production has brought about in Africa. But Currently, Rwanda is a model in Africa in terms of waste, particularly waste plastic management, and trying to move away from plastic products to paper products.
Isn't that similar to what Lagos State is trying to do with the ban on single-use plastics, the one that is popularly called takeaway?
Yeah, I think so. But if you look at just that ban of that just one item, does not represent a full control of the waste management ecosystem. Rwanda is over 70% compliance, because they even have a policy framework on how, as a company, are you going to discard some of your products within a 5-6 years system. To what extent are you able to replace that? So there are laws that guide that very specifically, though we have some of those laws, but in terms of implementation, I think we are not there yet.
All right. Apart from banning the styrofoam, which the Lagos State government particularly has placed a ban on in Lagos State, the one Femi called takeaway, that restaurant owners and inner parties you get to see.
The ones we use most often.
Yes,
That's the
and
popular.
for food. Now, these talks are ongoing, and even if a concrete agreement is not reached, there is still the Korea meeting that will happen sometime this year.
Around
yes,
December, which is the final.
Yes, to talk more on that, and maybe that will be where the treaties that will actually control plastic use globally will be made. But if eventually there is a reduction in the production of plastics, and then there is a control on what plastics can be used, the go-to naturally would be the paper industry to replace plastics with paper. Do you think that can be sustained, given where paper comes from?
Okay, in terms of the depletion on
wouldn't that be solving one problem and creating another?
But I just think, in my view, a balance will be created so that you're able to sustain the natural environment. But I think, for me, we should do with one particular issue. Plastic has become a very bad influence. If you look through the waterways, particularly in Africa, you see the damage that plastic is doing. But the other alternative to plastic, and I think the focus will be going back to some of the cultural and traditional things that we use in even serving food and serving other liquid items. Sometime in an environment, I was surprised at what you do in Africa here, where people serve some cereal on some natural leaves is being used in some part of Asia. I think those cultural things must be infused into the way we use items, either to store liquid, items for distribution of cereals or food or whatever it is. So I agree with your question that if we move into one of the alternatives, which is paper, again, paper is coming from wood, and when you falling woods in the environment, again, that would be a major degradation to the environment, which will impact on the climate.
Now, plastic production is projected to triple by the year 2060. Now, as this is being looked into now in this treaty, what kind of arrangement do you think should be put in place to address the issue of plastic management, which is far, in fact, the greatest challenge, not just the production now alone? Since it's going to triple, that's the projection that by 2060. What kind of policy should be put in place in this kind of treaty to address the issue of plastic management, especially in Africa, where more of that is done?
Personally, I'm a bit worried that African leaders, in particular, are taking a stand in a way that does not really impact on their people. But if we scale it up globally, there's a disconnect between the the milestone of 2030 in trying to see how you can mitigate climate change. And people are speculating maybe 30 years after your initial milestone of how you want to reduce plastic. You're saying that it's going to triple or double. I think that's a misnomer. So I think the treaty, if it comes true, that idea of increasing by 2060 may not be desirable at the end of the day. But I think leaders and negotiators should focus, and by extension, civil society, in terms of campaign and activism, should focus on the way that this production does not go beyond the thresholds which the various climate change summit has provided for.
So let's look at the waste management here. Now, one of the challenges with plastic use may not necessarily be the use, but the indiscriminate disposal of plastics. There are laws already, environmental laws, that control or guard these things, but we still find a discriminate disposal of plastic even into water bodies that become problems to the aquatic life. Now, what should be done to ensure that rather than disposal, there is recycling, and it's done in a way that from the point of use, it goes straight to the recyclers?
Yes, I think the problem here, I would like to start from the people. I think the way we manage our environment is not really very good, where people indiscriminately just dump waste everywhere. So we need to change our mindset in the way we discard products. So when you look at it from the circular economy principle of recycling, that is welcome. So the government needs to do more by providing some window or incentive of how people can dispose these products. So you put some little incentive where people can properly dispose that. Then the government itself, in her own social responsibility, must provide bins central, particularly in parks, bus stops, so that people can quickly do that. Then these people that are employed to clean the streets should equally be provided with some incentive so that their collections of plastic when they are cleaning the place will improve, because so that they have a stake in that. So the circular economy part of it is working, but the government needs to do more in terms of providing, because if you look around, there's a challenge of even public toilet system. You go to bus stops, you don't have proper waste disposal. You don't even have signages that direct people on how to behave. So we need a cultural mind change in that respect. And the African issue at the ongoing preparation in terms of negotiation and draft for the treaty is that of waste management. So they must look inward, on not just go into a summit environment to just say, problem, how do you support us in how we manage our waste? You must put a kind of environment that sustains the management of, and we equally have, like I mentioned, Rwanda in particular, they have a system that shows that you can be directed in a manner that you don't just put things anyhow in any place as you move along.
To your point about government providing waste baskets and waste bins for people to dump plastic in, let's look at compliance, because sometimes these bins are provided, and even the plastic cans, it is clearly written how they should be disposed, but you still find people dumping in gutters, dumping in places they should not. Do we need some form of reorientation, and should there be like a task force compelling people to do what should be done?
Personally, I don't believe in task force. They are military kind of management systems that are not encouraging. I think I spoke to that. We can educate people in a way that it becomes part part of them. The Rwanda example I gave may not originally have been there, but after the genocide, they've been able to engineer the minds of their people to behave in a manner that help to sustain the environment and the society. On the other hand, there are label waste disposal buckets or bags and whatever it is, but the level of those provisions are very small. So compliance, yes, but I think we just need to provide more. So if you travel, if you're commuting between the city and where you reside, and you stop by, if you take an average of about 10 lay-by, maybe a bus stop, maybe you see just about only 2 places that has. Every public space should have those bins. Okay? And they should be marked differently. And I talked about a kind of incentive that provide people to behave in a particular manner. So the change behavior or communication change dynamics will support those kind of ecosystems rather than when you put police just jumping around the street, just making a few examples of people. It's not sustainable. Look at the ones that deal with traders in Lagos. As soon as they move by, in another 20 minutes, they are moving into the system. They equally have informants, even within the regulator, that say we are moving towards a particular direction, so they move in that area. So it's better to do a mind-shifting arrangement that where people's behavior can change over a period of time by deliberate information management. A communication change dynamics will occur over a period of time, and the people can change their mental behavior and how they can sustain their environment. I think that's more desirable, like this task force that we inherited from the military high command.
All right, let's wrap up by creating a link between our first discussion and this one. Today is International Day of Multilateral Diplomacy. Now, if you look at the situation playing out in the treaty in Canada, nations are divided. So what kind of multilateral diplomacy should be deployed into this to ensure that the first ever plastic treaty becomes the order of the day or a reality?
Okay, at the level of multilateral diplomacy, that is between multilateral agencies, so that's to a very large extent, that's one element of diplomacy. There are other elements of diplomacy. So as we involve based on the United Nations system that support multilateral diplomacy, I think there are other tracks of diplomacy, and that has been used, people-to-people diplomacy, even which is recognized, where a multilateral window or channels of diplomacy is not sustainable in some aspects. You use people-to-people diplomacy, you use high-power people, network, to be able to influence international diplomacy. What do I mean by this? Where there was an issue between the United States of America on the re-emergence of the president of the African Development Bank, the likes of Obasanjo, Thabo Mbeki were doing some people-to-people negotiation on the backstage. So that's one hand. Within the international system that is enabled by the UN, multilateral diplomacy is the mainstay of international negotiation. But then you have other tracks of diplomacy that must flow into that multilateral diplomacy, and Dr. Edausa explicitly spoke to some of the issues. But the challenge for us as Africa, the way we play in that sector has not really been encouraging. So within our own framework, in terms of multilateral, we must act as a bloc so that our voice in the diplomatic arena can be heard. And let's not just always be part of summit diplomacy or multilateral diplomacy. We must equally walk the talk in terms of how we behave within the diplomatic setting.
What I imply is that will it make any impact on the ongoing division as regards this treaty if the issue of diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy, if that is deployed?
No, the point is that to a very
Because
large
you have
extent,
nations, some like-minded nations are taking another position.
the points I'm making is that this in itself, there's a multilateral diplomatic practice already ongoing. But you're saying, if I understand you correctly, is that the division, people will always divide. But at the end of the day, the greater voice, the greater power, we might just take the day. But that practice and the other windows of diplomacy, because you have the civil society group who are not official channels in terms of global diplomatic practice, but they have a very strong impact. So that's another layer of engagement. Then you have negotiators within that ecosystem who are like technical people who understand the play at the field, who are a bit neutral to some extent. So everybody within that setting will reach a consensus. But the worry is that the big seven, the Chinas of this world, the Americans of this world, the United Kingdom of this world, will always win the day because they are the major player. And that's why people have been arguing that that system should be restructured in line with other players.
Thank you so much, Sam Orovwuje, who is Director, Center for Public Policy, for being on Ed Exchange this morning.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Early Exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.